Well, hello there, my friends. My name is Garrett J White, the founder of Wake Up Warrior, and welcome to this week's episode here at WarriorWealth, the podcast. I'm running this game solo. No guests, no friends, no invitations, just me, real, raw, relevant results, talking about the topics of making money, keeping money, and growing money. Today here in episode number 10, we're wrapping back around the game when it comes to the topic of power. Now, if you're new to the show, guess what? Let me give you a little clue into what we're up to here and why we do it. This particular podcast is actually built and created for businessmen. It's not that any other man couldn't get value from it. It's not that women couldn't get value from it. But specifically, I'm going to speak to the challenges that are being a man, being married, being in business, and then producing and creating and maintaining money. This wonderful topic that seems to plague all of us at some level, but particularly as businessmen who have to write the checks, who have to hit the payroll, who have to actually support individuals in not only having a job, but then at the same time create tremendous amounts of value for the marketplace in order to continue to grow the business. But at the same time, inside of that pressure of growing the business, trying to figure out at some level, how do I actually keep some of the money that I make? How do I actually grow the money that I make? And so this show here at WarriorWealth, the podcast, is meant to, well, speak about that. Unlike the other podcasts I do with Warrior on Fire every single day, talking about the fiery topic of having it all, and unlike the topics we do with Date Your Wife, where my wife and I talk about sex, and we talk about money, and we talk about parenting, and we talk about communication, here inside this podcast is my opportunity every single week to do one thing, and that is to talk about the game of money and to talk about the game around money. Now, if you weren't aware of the fact that this is not something new to me, there are many people who only know me as Wake Up Warrior. They don't know who I was before. They don't know I was a banker. They don't know I was an investor. Most people don't even know my backstory. And here inside of this show, I'm not going to spend much time today bringing you up to speed. But my hope is throughout this journey that you understand that I'm a man just like you. And inside of that, I wake up every single day and I face the pressures and I face the obstacles that are being a businessman, and not just being a businessman, but one who is committed to creating wealth. And this, in our world, boils down to three simple conversations: your capacity and ability to make money, your capacity to keep money, and your capacity to grow the money that you keep. So we're going to work on this inside of different topics. And if you're here for the first time, here's how it works out. We go through power the very first week, or this episode. Next week's episode will be on the topic of production, where we'll go into marketing, sales, systems, automation, sequencing, etc. Then we'll go into the third show, and the third show every single week is about profit, which is accounting and bookkeeping and dealing with the money and margins and ultimately the money side of pricing and everything else that comes in a business. And then we're going to look at the last piece, which is actually protecting everything that you have produced. So, power, production, profit, protection. Today, we're going to talk about the topic of power. So this morning I woke up and I had a message. I get the joy of getting lots of messages from lots of people. Some of you even here live watching this. I'm going to give you a couple more minutes of this taste, and then you're going to have to head over to WarriorWealthNow.com and pick up this show and the rest of what we do here, as well as the action tips, tricks, action sets, etc. with this particular show, and or make sure that you're subscribed inside iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or SoundCloud to get every episode we do here every single week. But for my live stream audience, enjoy for a little bit as we run into this. So I get a message this morning from one of my friends and one of my clients, and he's super stressed out. Like super stressed out to the point of actually sleeping only 2 to 3 hours a night. And the fun part is I just looked on the live stream and he's actually here watching this live stream. And so this message is for you, buddy, to get us kicked off today. Now, I understand it and I appreciate it. One of the hardest games that's difficult to explain to an employee, somebody who has a job. I have nothing wrong with somebody being an employee. Zero issue with this. Zero. But the plan to producing wealth as an executive or an employee is a very different strategy than producing wealth as a businessman, as an entrepreneur. You have to be a special kind of fucking crazy to want to run a business. Like there's a special little place in heaven that goes for the crazy people, the lunatics who actually decided to do it. Now, right next to him are all the lunatic executives who could ultimately probably be entrepreneurs, but who align with a particular crazy person and say, I fucking believe in this vision this lunatic is bringing and preaching, and you know what? I want to jump on this rodeo. Forget running my own thing. I want to build an empire with him. And so this topic can apply to high-level executives as well as to entrepreneurs. Now, here's what happens. You wake up in the morning and there's this fucking shit show that begins in your mind. Right? It's not like you wake up every morning and you're like saying, hey, you know what I'd really like to do? I'd really like to have 1,000 thoughts that are stressful as fuck. I'd like to have a ton of weight and stories and fear and doubt and worry. I'd really love to just put this in the way today because that's how you love to start the day. Like, there's not one fucking person on the planet I've ever met that wants to wake up this way. Yet, somehow, we get into the topic of being an entrepreneur and we're idiots about it. Now, when I went down the path, I had no idea. I was a PE teacher. I was a football coach. I got my hands on a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and off I went into being what I thought was a businessman. What I really was a hired salesman, and I was a pitchman, which was not a problem at all. I started inside the mortgage industry. My first 6 months in the business, here is what my day-to-day entailed. I walked in. My boss at the time was 20 years old. I was 25 years old. He was younger than me. He wouldn't look me in the eyeballs. He was terrified of human beings and people, so he just wouldn't look at me. I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. All I knew was I had seen the check that my friend was making as a mortgage broker. I looked at his check from 1 week, and I looked at my checks from the previous 6 months as a PE teacher. It was a very simple fucking decision for me. I was like, I don't give a shit what we're doing, but I'm getting the fuck out of here. Now, I end up over inside of the mortgage world, but I have no idea what a mortgage is because I had never owned a home. I had never had a mortgage. I had never had a loan. At the time, I was a very stressed out individual about making big, huge fucking financial commitments in my life that look something like this. On the same day, I had to make two major commitments. Like major commitments that were stressing me out at levels that I had never been stressed before when it came to money. Commitment number one was a commitment to, well, a cell phone contract. And this wasn't like the smartphone cell phone contracts now where you get like 16-year-old kids who have $400, $800 cell phone bills and think that should be normal, or homeless people who have no home, no car, no bike, and steal grocery carts from grocery stores but still somehow have an iPhone with an AT&T contract for $400 a month. Like, this was long before that time. I have a Nokia cell phone. It's like a block. It's like this little brick cell phone with a little thing. The provider of the cell phone service at the time was Cricket. Now, Cricket, these assholes, wanted me to sign a contract for $20 a month. Now, this decision took me all day long. Like, all day long, I had to make the decision. I'm looking at the money. I'm like, part of this money is going to child support. Part of this money is paying for my bullet bike. Part of this money is paying for my rent, that we squoze 2 more guys into the condo. And so now I'll find, 7 of us, and we're paying like, $50 a month. Like, I'm looking at what I have and I'm stressing out about this $20 cell phone contract. Now, another side note that has actually nothing to do with the cell phone contract idea. At that time, I also thought it was a good fucking idea to have a floating, like a cloud. Like, you imagine like your little girl wearing, or putting on like a cell phone case on her new iPhone, and it has like clouds on like a little sun and maybe like some like Care Bear shit. Well, dude, for some reason, I had that going on. Now, at the same time, I also had a car. I had a car I had bought for $1,000, and the seat covers were Hawaiian print seat covers. Now, to make matters even worse, I also had determined at that time in my life that pina colada air freshener that you would use to spray in your car to make your car smell nice, that you could take pina colada and you could spray it on yourself and you could completely eliminate this game of cologne. Like, who wants to pay $40 for cologne when you could have pina colada air freshener for like a gallon for like $1? Now, also in the back of my car was a tub of gel. It was a huge tub of gel that I got from Costco and or Target, I can't remember, somewhere. Giant. I mean, it was a giant tube of gel, like... Put it in my hair. Now, I still do like the hair going on. The only difference now is that I've got some product. I'm like official. I'm like, in the hair world, I've got product. I don't have fucking gel. I got hair product. So I'm sitting in all of this situation. I'm stressing out about making this cell phone contract, losing my mind, and now I've got to make a second commitment. Now, the second commitment was like the mind bender of all mind benders. The gym that I was going to changed their pricing, and they were no longer doing month to month. I had to commit to a 12-month contract. And this 12-month gym contract with me and the cell phone was for $40 a month. So I'm sitting here with 2 major financial commitments going on inside of my world. cell phone contract for $20, and I've got a gym membership for $40. And God knows I don't have a lot of money because I'm using pina colada for air freshener. I got Hawaiian print seat covers in a $1,000 Dodge Plymouth with no struts. It bounced down the road like I was trying to be like a guy with hydraulics on my vehicle, only I wasn't. I just didn't have any money to replace the fucking struts on the front of the car, so I rolled like this. And inside of that place, I'm trying to make a commitment. By 7 o'clock that night, I made the commitment, and I signed up for the cell phone, and I signed up for the gym membership. In the same couple months, I left the PE world as a PE teacher with a guaranteed shitty paycheck, and I headed into the path of entrepreneurism. For 6 months, I would sit in this little cubicle down in the basement of this small little warehouse. They handed me a stack of papers. They called them leads. What they really were numbers and names of people who had VA home loans. They gave me a calculator. This calculator didn't even work normal. This calculator was backwards. Like, it wasn't like you could just ask Siri some shit. There was no Siri. There was a calculator. They gave it to you as an HP 12C calculator. This calculator, every formula you did it backwards. So like everything was inputted the reverse. It's like Spanish where you're putting the verbs and nouns and the pronouns and adjectives. Everything's like backwards compared to speaking in English. Now, I got that in Spanish, but there I was trying to figure out how to do this in the basement. I'm calling individuals who were in their 50s, who are veterans of the military, who have VA home loans, and I'm trying to convince them that they need to refinance. For 6 months, I make no money. Now, remember, I have the cell phone contract. I also have the gym contract. I have no money. I am living on a Discover card that, thank God, in college I had applied for, and they gave it to me. How they gave it to me, I have no idea, because I ended up taking this credit card, going to the mall, maxing it out, having no concept of how a credit card works, not realizing that all that shit I just bought, I was going to have to pay for. Now, logically, this seems to make sense. You're sitting there and you're thinking, Garrett, you're an idiot. I know. I get it. When I look back at me at 25, I'm almost 42. At 25, when I made the leap in running my own company and running my own businesses 17 years ago, I had almost zero financial IQ. If there was financial IQ and then there was like negative financial IQ, I was the negative guy on the financial IQ. I wasn't even smart enough to realize that when you used a credit card, you'd have to pay it back. I don't know where I was living in my brain, but somehow I just assumed that this was just a gift from the gods of Discover. I had discovered the God's gift to guys like me to go get some free shit. The credit card balance was $900, but it might as well have been $9 million to me, and I spent all $900 at once. Now, I had another credit card inside of that I had also applied for that had a $4,000 limit on it. Now, this time was different. I sat there and I used this credit card to pay my bills for the first 6 months as a mortgage broker. 6 months. I sat in the basement of this office and I called 12 to 14 hours a day. I would make 25 to 30 phone calls and I would get fuck you very much, fuck you very much, fuck you very much, fuck you very much. If I was lucky, most of the time I would just get a click and a good night. This is before they started putting all the call regulations out, etc. You could pretty much just call anybody. So I'm calling people and I'm talking to them and I'm trying to have a conversation with them about possibility and prosperity, and I'm fucking hustling and I'm listening to this 20-year-old manager of mine who's giving me the pointers because this kid's killing it. The year before I came in, he did $400,000 as a 20-year-old. So I believe there was someone I saw who did this. So what ended my experience inside of this, and we're going to end our story here with this point, is I'm 6 months into the game. I'm having this rough day. I'm not getting anybody to talk to me. I'm not closing loans, and loans are crazy because you got to submit the loan, and then the loan takes processing and underwriting, and even though it was a streamlined mortgage, this shit took forever, at least in my mind, because I was living on the cell phone contract, the gym membership, the apartment I had to rent, the child support I was paying, the motorbike, the bullet bike I was paying on, which was like $75 a month for like 75 years or some plan they'd put me on. I'm sitting in all this situation. Side note, I'm actually lucky that my friend wrecked that bike because they totaled it, paid off the loan. I didn't get another one. I was like in trouble. So I'm sitting there and I'm having this rough night. And I'm sitting in this conversation with this woman, and I'm trying to have this conversation about her refinancing her home from a 9.5% down to an 8.95%. And we're talking about savings, and I'm trying to do the fucking calculations in the little HP12C, and it's all fucking backwards, and I'm all confused. I'm sweating. I'm nervous. I'm feeling the pressure from no money. I'm feeling the pressure from people who are closing around me, but I'm not figuring it out. I'm just not that smart. Again, I started negatively. There was like, you're smart, and then there's like, you're really not smart, and then there's like, you're just a fucking idiot, and that's where I was financially. I just not a fucking smart person at all. No knowledge, no wisdom, no understanding, no experience, panicking over cell phone contracts and my next bottle of pina colada air freshener. And I have this conversation with this woman, and I say, she says, why don't you call me back when it gets to 8%? And I'll refinance. And I look at her through my mind's eye, because I'm on the phone with her, so I can't actually look at her. But I look at her through my mind's eye, and I say the following. Lady, it will be a cold day in hell before interest rates get down to 8.5%. And I hung up the phone. Now, little did I know, interest rates would go to like fucking 0.5% over the next decade, and shit would completely change, and the mortgage industry would turn on its face, and I would eventually figure out what the fuck I was doing, only to have everything I was doing completely swipe away because I wasn't a real businessman. I was a man who was raping an industry with a whole bunch of other people raping an industry, and we weren't actually skilled. But I finally hit this rock bottom place. And I don't know where you're at as a businessman, but I can tell you that all of us have been to this place where it's just this rock bottom situation where you're like, I don't know if I can fucking do this anymore. Like, I just don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if it's going to be possible. And that night I sat alone, and everybody had left the office, and it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sitting in the basement of this office in this tiny cubicle, and I had this headphone connected to tapes, and I would get tapes because tapes were cheaper than CDs, and so I would get tapes of Robert Kiyosaki, and I would put those tapes into the player, in this little fucking player I had, and I would put on these shitty headphones, and I would listen, and I would just hope and dream and continue to believe. And that's what I hope this show is. That's what I hope that people say, Gary, you do 5 podcasts a week, for God's sakes. You put out more free content out into the marketplace than anyone that we know of. I mean, there's a few people like Gary Vaynerchuk push shitloads out, even more than me. But like inside of what we do with Date Your Wife, with Warrior Wealth, with Warrior on Fire, Warrior Week, Big Money Stylist, all the content we put on social media, people are like, Gary, you're an asshole for charging $100 for Warrior Book. I'm like, fuck you, asshole. Like, you know how much shit we put out there? And I put it out there for the following reason. Because there are individuals and there are businessmen, both successful and unsuccessful right now, and men who want to make the leap who are just terrified, and you need somebody in your ear. You need somebody like I had that night with Robert Kiyosaki sitting on my headphones, my shitty little Sony headphones, my shitty little Sony tape player with my shitty little tapes that could just give me hope to continue to go. And so today's show, I'm going to talk about this idea of power that I discovered because the next day I made my first mortgage close. I made $4,732. Within the next 6 months, I would end up being at $55,000 to $60,000 a month in take-home income. In less than 18 months, I went from a broke-ass PE teacher stressing about cell phone bills that were $20 to a kid who was making $50,000 to $60,000 a month, and my life fucking changed forever. But along that path were a series of decisions and commitments and painful situations I had to choose to continue to fucking double down, and that has not changed for 17 years. And today we're going to talk about some tools. We're going to talk about perspective. We're going to talk about how perspective itself ultimately is the only thing that gives us the power and the tools that we actually need. That it is our ability to stay in a powerful perspective that gives you and I the opportunity to actually continue to create. And so for my live stream folks, bye-bye. We're going to end. I would love to give you the answer, but you're going to have to actually go subscribe to the show, and you'll get the rest of the answer there. So we're saying goodbye to our live stream audience, and now we are staying here with you. So perspective became everything for me. It became everything about what I stood for. It became everything about what I was hunting. What I had never realized was that my greatest protection to power, and power, again, we've discussed over and over again here in this show, is your capacity to do work. So if we look at capacity inside of who you and I are as individuals, our capacity is what gives us the ability to do shit. The reason why I was so stressed out about a cell phone bill at $20 and a gym membership at $40, because those things were pushing me past the limits of what my current capacity had been, or at least my capacity at that time. Now, I couldn't even tell you how much my cell phone bill is. It's handled as part of our expenses. I have no idea. Like, the business pays for it. I don't know how much my cell phone is. I don't worry about what my cell phone bill is right now. I have other people on my team that worry about how much my cell phone bill is. My job is to produce and to create content and to continue to push. Like, this is a reality for me. And so my perspective inside of this, of pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and staying in power, that this power play is what I'm hunting for, comes down to an understanding that my capacity and my perspective are directly correlated. Now, what is correlation? Correlation is interesting. Like, if we look at this and statistics and in statistics, or we're looking at this through engineering, or we're looking at this through programming, we're looking at this through the medical field, and I'm a doctor. The inevitable thing is that we're looking for correlations. Now, what correlation is that this thing over here is related to this other thing over here. We may look at this also as like an if-then scenario or a trigger response game where there is a symptom and there is a source, and that there is a correlation between this source and this symptom that I'm seeing here. And so people will look at the idea of creating wealth, and individuals will look at the idea of trying to produce wealth, and businessmen will try to solve problems inside of their businesses in order to expand their wealth. But the challenge that they run into is a very interesting challenge. And the challenge is that they're not limited by not knowing what to do. More often than not, they're limited by their capacity to actually do, or they are limited by their perspective, which is correlated to their power. They're limited by what they can see as a possibility. And so the possibility that they live in and the possibility that they experience becomes this interesting place for them. Because you and I, we cannot conceive of a new possibility from a perspective that cannot see the possibility. Now, as a young man in business, I had a very limited perspective. My perspective went through this void of making the leap from PE teacher to going into mortgages. Like this massive leap that happened, this terrifying void I had to traverse in which I made no money. I went backwards. Backwards, it felt like I went backwards, and yet I was actually going forwards. Because in order to change your perspective, in order to change what you see, in order for you to obtain a possibility that does not currently exist inside of you today, you have to actually shift the perspective that you have that is empowered by the power that you experience. So we're going to come around to this perspective idea, though, and I'm going to talk about it in the following way. Okay, back in the day, I was listening to many different trainers on audio when I first started as a businessman. I never realized why people would go to personal development, why they were looking to individuals to inspire, motivate, or shift the perspective. Tomorrow, I'll get on a flight. I'll fly to Chicago, Illinois to be with one of my mentors, Dan Sullivan, and strategic coach. And I go, people say, why do you go? You don't need to go. I was like, I get that I don't need to go. But I spend a day in travel, and I relax in the hotel, and I work. And then I go to this event between 9 and 5 o'clock, and we talk about shit. And then I get back on a plane, and I fly home. And people say, well, why would you pay $25,000 for 4 days a year to go sit in a room, spending 2 days of travel, your own airfare, your hotels, being gone from your businesses? Like, why would you do this? And it's very, very simple, because I'm looking to get outside of my business and have a new perspective. So I was looking for the same thing back in the day. The problem was my financial IQ was very, very low, which means the things that I understood about money were very, very low. And the only way that I could actually create some really cool shit was to change the power and the perspective that I had. So I was listening to some tapes, and there was a concept came out. It wasn't a new concept. It still is not a new concept. You may have heard of it. You may have not, which is the idea of be, do, have. I don't even know who the original person was that taught this. I'm certain it was probably Jesus or someone else before him. I don't know. It's been around for a very, very long time. So whoever actually started it, kudos to you and your credit for getting it. I just don't know who to credit. I was listening to this be, do, have conversation from a guy by the name of Mark Victor Hansen. And so I'm listening to Mark Victor Hansen talk about this be, do, have concept, that who you're being ultimately empowers what you're able to do, and what you're doing ultimately delivers what you're having. Now think about this little formula here. What I'm having today versus what I was having as a PE teacher. What I'm having today versus what I was having in my first 6 months as a mortgage broker. What I'm having today versus what I was having back in the day. Like, what I'm having today is in direct relationship to what I'm doing. Right? My morning routine, for example. My morning routine is radically different than what it used to be. In my original years of mortgages and banking and my first companies that I moved to Las Vegas after that initial stint of VA home loans, when I moved my companies to Vegas and we started building and expanding, there was this interesting thing that happened. My morning routines became a shit show. I would show up at the office at 7 o'clock in the morning. Okay, and I would work until 9 o'clock at night. Like, I was at the office all fucking day long, 7 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. I stopped working out. I was working out maybe twice a week. I started getting a gut. I started getting overweight. I started not looking fit. Like, I started having all this trauma going on inside of my world. I was eating like shit. I had no meditation going on. There was no prayer going on. There was no commitment to this. What there was a man who was committed to going to work at 7 in the morning until 9, 10 o'clock at night. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, this kind of hustle, because I think every entrepreneur in the beginning is going to spend 14 to 18 hours a day inside of the game, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's part of the process. It's part of how the game works. It's part of what you're going to experience, and there isn't a whole way to get around it. Like, you're going to be in that place. That's just how it goes. So when we step away from the possibility of this then, and we look at this perspective idea, inside of my morning perspective was limited by the coffee or the soda that I was drinking or the energy drink. There was no deliberate setup. What I was doing was being driven by who I was being, and what I was having was a lot of chaos in business with smaller teams in the beginning that I really didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't manage. Now, take and fast forward that 17 years. My morning starts at 5 o'clock every single morning if I don't wake up sooner. My alarm goes off at 5 irregardless. Usually I wake up between 4:30 and 4:45. I see what time it is. I get up anyways and I go. That time then turns into my time. Between 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning until 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning is my time to do work. I message people I care about. I deal with my core 4 work inside of the Warrior's Way. I do a stack, which is a tool you can learn about by going to warriorbook.com, a tool the businessman, 10,000 plus men inside the Warrior Brotherhood are using every single day to keep themselves in check and keep themselves moving forward. So I do all of these routines for 2 hours. Then I go surf for 45 minutes to an hour. Then I drive my children to school. Then I go float. I go to a float tank or I go meditate. And inside of that meditation, I then do a daily podcast with Warrior on Fire. I then also wrap up my entire core 4. I call my wife. I make sure everybody's in check. I roll into the office. I eat my breakfast at about 9:45, 10 o'clock in the morning. By 10 o'clock in the morning, I am lit the fuck on fire. That's when I'm doing this podcast with you. I started just after 10 o'clock in the morning. My routine today, I'll work until 7 o'clock. My routine is ruthless. It is lethal. But I realized that part of my perspective back in the day was I didn't have enough time to go work out. I didn't have enough time to work on me. Now that I was a business owner, the only amount of time I had was the time that should be in my chair at my office working my ass off. That was the only thing I needed to be concerned about, was getting to the office and working really, really hard. And so that's what I did. Not recognizing that I was losing tremendous amounts of power. I get more done before 10 in the morning and 7 o'clock at night in one day than I used to get done in a month or longer as an original business owner. Why is this? Yes, my capacity and skill sets over time. I've got bigger teams, smarter teams, wiser teams. We're into shit. We're deep into games and business that we understand, that we get way better than I understood back then. But the real pattern began with how I actually thought I should start my morning. So who I'm being in the morning is typically a lunatic. Who you're being in the morning as an entrepreneur is not normally waking up in power. This is not a normal thing. You and I do not wake up in normalcy in the morning. We wake up typically to a default of fucking stress. We wake up to a default of worry and concern. We wake up to a complete shit show of possibility. And so all the thoughts and all the pressure and all this world is upon us, and taxes and accounting and payroll and personnel and executives and big moves, and there's all this chaos that's sitting inside the game. And inside of all that chaos, we have to try to find clarity. So what do most men do? They get up late, they hit the snooze button, they go to the coffee shop, they get some Starbucks, they head to the office, and they hope this shit just gets aligned by the time they get there. Right? My son just started working here for us, and we're super pumped to have him. But he doesn't have his morning routine locked down. So he walks in, the rest of my team's eyes are lit on fire. They've been going since 5 o'clock in the morning. Parker's getting up at like 8 o'clock in the morning. He rolls into the office at 9 o'clock in the morning. His brain's barely awake. His eyes are barely awake. And he's sitting there just going, fuck, what? Right? And I'm like, dude, you're going to have to change your patterns. But again, where does he come from? He came from college, and inside the university life, they sleep until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning, and they just like sleep. And their sleeping routines and awake routines are completely all over the place. Here at Warrior, though, we don't tolerate it. We're like, you're going to change your routine. You're going to get up early. You're going to do your shit because we get shit going here. By 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, everybody's in the office, lit on fire and moving forward. Your being is 80 to 90% of your success every single day in your doing. Men will ask me, how do I lead with more power inside of my business? I was like, well, tell me your morning routine. What's your morning routine? Tell me how your day starts. And then I'll tell you what kind of leader you're being. And then we'll talk about some tactics, some things that you could do. So typically, people will want to know what to do. They'll say, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do, Garrett. I was like, listen, I could tell you what to do. And I will tell you what to do. But we have to first look at who you're being. And particularly as a businessman, we've got to look at your morning routine, for God's sakes. The second thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at your sleeping patterns. What is your sleeping pattern? Now, years ago, I had no concern for sleeping. I didn't. I would sleep 2 to 3 to 4 hours. That's the fun part about what I'm telling you about my old original business days, too. I was not only not home and not doing a morning routine, I was never sleeping. Then I found like this syrupy shit called Redline. Like this little syrupy thing. It was like Redline was like back when ephedrine was like starting to get crazy. And I had Redline, and it was in this little syrupy bottle I would get at the nutrition store. And I would put a little Redline into this little cap. And then I would take a little out of the cap, maybe kind of like you were taking medicine and pouring it in. It tasted like medicine too. And within about 20 seconds, my heart would be like, and my body was like, da, da, da! Only to recognize that what I was doing was like completely horrible to my heart. And that caffeine was my way of getting started. It also allowed me to stop sleeping as much. So during my first 5 years of being a businessman, I slept about 3 to 4 hours minimum or maximum a night. Most nights it was 2 to 3. 2 to 3 hours, because my story was I need to be more productive. Now, throughout all of this that's going on and all of this lack of sleep, I'm getting more and more fatigued. Here's the truth about fatigue. Fatigued men make fucking shitty decisions. Take fatigued men and add alcohol. Take a fatigued businessman and add drugs. Add marijuana, add cocaine, add any type of substance to that man, and you will watch this fatigued, stressed out businessman who's not sleeping with no morning routine. You will watch him make some of the most horrific personal and business decisions ever. Most of what my job entails when it comes to my high-level consulting, businessmen that I get to work with one-on-one inside of my programs that start between $250,000 to $500,000 a year, inside of that game, working one-on-one with them and their teams, here is what I can tell you happens. Inside of that place, 99% of the time, I am engaging a man who is doing two things, and he's lacking the ability to lead. He's missing two things, though. Two things that are difficult to train and change in a man who has a pattern of a decade or two or sometimes 3 decades of routine, which is 1, sleeping. Sounds crazy, right? Because you don't have enough time, you think. I don't have enough time to sleep. Sleeping is for the weak. I used to be a proponent of this. I was probably like the poster child for no sleep. I was the one who was like grinding, hustling, making it happen. Fuck sleep. Hashtag fuck the sleep time. Hashtag don't need sleep. Hashtag sleep is for pussies. Like I was that guy. And then I got older. Then I got to be 40. Then I got to be 41. Now I'm about knocking on the door of 42. And I'm sitting here and going, man, I was an idiot. Like I wasn't getting more done at at all I wasn't getting more done. Middle of my afternoons typically look like this. It was like this fatigue factor where I'd be tired as shit. Like I'd be so tired just trying to keep my eyes open, just trying to grind through that like 1:30 to 3:30 game before I'd get this extra energy boost that would happen in the afternoon. I didn't meditate at the time, I had no morning routine, and I wasn't sleeping, and I was drinking a shitload of this red line syrup every day just to keep myself lit up and on fire. Now, this game does not work long term. The first two things I'm coming in and adjusting inside of any man's situation is number one is sleeping routines, and number two is morning routine. These two things will have some of the greatest impact on an organization, on an individual, and on a producer that you could ever imagine. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to look at it. They don't think that it has anything to do with it. You show me an overweight man who is fatigued, who's at adrenal fatigue because he's drinking too much caffeine, he's not sleeping enough, he doesn't meditate, he has no morning routine, yet this same guy is trying to manage tens of millions of dollars, trying to lead companies that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars as an executive or a businessman, trying to lead, and yet inside of that can't even fucking lead himself out of a goddamn bucket. Trying to make decisions empowered by caffeine. Trying to make decisions thinking the creative flow has come, yet the creative flow is not coming. The creative flow comes from a body that is rested. It comes from a body that has been weaponized. So these are the two things we're facing, the weaponization of a body, and at the same time, the ability to bring calmness to the nervous system. So look at these two things. Your nervous system affects everything. It affects what you see. Your central nervous system affects what you feel. Your central nervous system affects how your body operates. Your central nervous system is arguably the tree of life inside of your body. That nervous system is directly connected to the stem of your brain. Your brain is your computer system. Your computer system is linked up to your nervous system and your heart circulatory system. These three systems, your brain, your central nervous system, and your circulatory system linked up to your heart. These three areas must have sleep. Your brain must be shut down and rest. Your heart must slow down and rest. Your nervous system must be released of stress. Guess when you do three of those things? When you sleep. But I'm not talking about some shitty ass sleep. I'm talking about sleeping by 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night and waking up 6, 7, 8 hours later. Everybody's body is different. My body is 6 to 7 hours. That is my sweet spot. If I go past 7 hours, it is no good for me. If I go less than 6 hours, it is no good for me. I am right in between 6 and 7 hours. Now, you've got to find your sweet spot. Some of you are trying to produce really big shit, but you don't fucking sleep. And because you don't sleep, you then work your ass off through the week making horrible decisions with a fatigued nervous system and a heart that is never getting given a chance to slow down. And both your nervous system and your heart are affecting your mind, and your mind is controlling what you see and what you stress out about and what you believe is happening. This morning I was out surfing. There was a bit of a storm wave in. So I'm out surfing and the storm waves are there, and my mind keeps pretending like it's seeing a black fin that is circulating through the water. Now, I'm the only one out. My coach on the beach, he's videoing. It was probably, it's not a good day to go out. There was like too much wind. The wind had picked up, and so it was a bit of a stormy chop. But I caught 15, 20 waves, had a great time while I was doing it. But I'm out there, and my mind is lying to me. It's creating stories of illusion inside the war. The war is the waves, and the storm itself is pushing a whole set of waves, and occasionally I get a set wave come in, I catch it, would be fun. But all of it, like there was bigger swell today, but there was just too much wind. By this afternoon, it'll be fantastic. This morning was not so much that way. And so I'm out there, and my mind is creating this story. But it's funny because I'm sitting there. There's no stress for me. I'm not worried about a shark. My mind is like telling me, dude, bullshit, didn't see a fin. And even if I did see a fin, what am I going to do about it? If a shark wants to attack me, it's not like he's going to send a fucking beacon to me and be like, hey, dude, just so you know, I'm going to bite your leg off. Like, you're not going to see him coming. Nobody, sees a shark coming at him. The movies are dramatic. If a shark's going to get me, I'm fucking done. Like, he's going to hunt me down in the water. I got no chance. I'm in his territory. But if my mind starts to believe this stuff, if my mind starts to believe that this is what's happening, then all of a sudden inside the war, the game, I become a chaotic lunatic, and I not only don't catch waves, I become a crazy person who's terrified, and I paddle back to the beach. I retreat. This is what happens to business owners who are stressed out. Now, that is not what happened to me today. I changed my story in 2 seconds. I took a deep breath and I was done. I had slept very well. I slept 7 hours. I got up. I did 2 hours of my personal work. I then hit the water with my surf coach like I was in a rhythm. So there was no paranoia. There was no worry. There was no concern. But I've been out there on days when I have not done those things. And there is a deep paranoia. I'm constantly looking down under my board. I'm constantly looking down. My mind is like filled with all these thoughts and chaos and stress. And I'm looking down and I'm looking down. I'm looking down. I'm worried. This is no different for businessmen. No different for what you do. You come into your office every single day and you have a responsibility to manage your people, to deal with the chaos and the stress and the problems and the solving of the problems and the management of the systems and personnel and the vision and the trajectory and the accounting and the taxes. And you have all these people that work for you that are helping manage, but guess who they're looking to for the energetic leadership? They're looking to you. They're looking to you. And for some of you, you're like, I know, I got this. And then for the rest of you, which is a vast majority of you, you're like, shit. I'm trying to make more money. I'm trying to keep more money. I'm trying to grow more money, but I'm coming into the fight like a fucking lunatic. Second piece of this, your routine. Your morning routine has to be about doing 2 things to your mind. To your mind. It has to do 2 things to your mind. One thing it has to do to your mind is it has to purify your mind. How do we purify your mind? You purify your mind by getting all those shitty thoughts out of your mind. It's like taking a mental shit, right? Like you sit there, you have to take a shit. I have to take a shit every single morning before I go surfing. It's part of my routine. I sit there, I get up, I'm doing my thing. About 6:20, my body will be like, hey, just so you know, we got a package to drop off over at the pool. Head on over and get it handled. And then I'll go over and take a shit. Your mind is no different. When you go to bed, you wake up in the morning, your mind is filled with shit. It doesn't have truth in it. It has the chaos of coming right back to life. It's like waking up from a slumber and expecting people to know what to do right away. You go surprise somebody and turn the lights on at 3 o'clock in the morning and start clamming pans together and start, and you start telling people what to do. Well, they're not going to think real smart. You and I are not going to think real smart in that environment. Yet we wake straight up and most of you go straight to fucking social media. You go straight to your cell phones. You go straight to bullshit. Next thing you know, you're reading stories and articles about murders and terrorists and shootings in schools and the president's an idiot and everybody's going to die and Jesus is coming tomorrow. So fuck it, everything's done. Like you are reading all this shit and your mind is using all of that in its paranoid state to create fucking chaos in your mind. And you start to think that the fin is real. You start to think that the fin you see out in the water is real. And then you start to turn into a big megalodon shark. And next thing you know, there's probably 5 megalodon sharks. And then you're like paddling your ass away and you end your whole day terrified. And the next day you go back out to the same place in the water, but you don't go out in the water because you're terrified. You don't want to go out because you've already been out there. You know what's out there. Your mind created a story of what's out there. And next thing you know, you don't surf at all and you hate your life. This burns most businessmen out. They don't burn out because of the work. They don't burn out because of what has to be done. They don't stay limited and quit on their visions. And you didn't quit on your vision as a businessman to build tremendous amounts of wealth for your family through operating with your number one asset, which is you, and operating with your number one investment, which is your business. You didn't go to this place, right, on accident, although you are accidentally fucking it up. Maybe some of you are doing it on purpose. I don't know. But I do know that I was accidentally in my world fucking it up for almost a decade. And so in the morning, you've got to take a shit mentally. How do you do this? There's a tool that we talk about and that I use every single morning known as the Warrior Stack. This tool itself is part of the Warrior Book. Something you can learn inside the King's Kit and part of our brotherhood. And I would encourage you to do that by checking it out at WarriorBook.com. We'll also be teaching it in depth and how it applies to making marketing, sales, business, and team decisions and vision decisions with your company at the next WarriorWealth Summit that is coming up, that you can find out more details by going to WarriorWealthNow.com, where we'll have details on that upcoming workshop. So you've got to take a shit. So I use this tool called the Stack every morning, and I take a mental shit. Literally, I get all my negative thoughts out. I just vomit them. Type them up, type them up, let my rage out, my anger out, my frustration out, my stress out. I get it all out in a strategic game of about 47 questions, and at the end, I am done. I've taken a shit, and I also have a clear action of something I need to do, someone I need to talk to, some action I need to take. By the time I have done all this, I took a real shit, I took a mental shit, I got myself connected to my family through my core 4, and now I go out the door to surf. My mind is completely calm. Then I surf and I spend a moment with God inside the water, and I catch some waves and I enjoy it, and I'm in the coldness and the salt. And then I leave that and I connect with my kids and I drop my children off at school. And then I head to the float tank and I get in the float tank and I lay in the darkness and the void and I allow the voice to speak to me and guide me on what I need to do. And then I go eat the same breakfast every single fucking morning. Oatmeal, over easy eggs, 4 strips of bacon, 3 eggs and some oatmeal with some sugar and some fruit. And I eat that shit up. And then I come straight into the office at 10 o'clock and I fucking murder it. But if you went back and you looked at me at 5 o'clock, I was a shit show. Complete and utter shit show. So today's topic is this. Like, your sleeping and your morning routines mean everything. And if you don't have a strategy for dealing with yourself in the morning, and you don't have a strategy for allowing your body to recover at night, if you are fucking these two things up, you have no promise, my friend. No promise. Like, you're done. Like, you are not going to pull it off. Like, I don't give a shit how big you think your goals are. You can tell me all day long, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Here's what I will tell you. You will do it, some of you, and along the way, you will lose everything. Your marriage, your family, you will lose your children, you will lose your money too, because you're going to get divorced, and inside of that place, you're going to lose 70 to 80% of that wealth anyways. Or you're going to treat your body like shit so intensely that you're going to build this fucking empire only to take all the money that you have and desperately fly all over the world to some magical doctor to save you from fucking dying. Because the last part inside of this and the perspective I really want to throw down on this is the following. It's not enough just to build a business, gentlemen. It's not enough to just make the money. The reason why you got to sleep and handle your morning routines is because when you come home from work, guess what you also got to do? Connect with your wife and children. Yeah, I just threw another variable in there. Now take a man who doesn't sleep. Take a man who has no morning routine. Take a man that doesn't meditate. And take that man and throw him into work for 10 to 12 hours a day trying to run his business. Then take that man and the text messages start to come at about 6 o'clock. 6:30, where you at? When you coming home? Dinner's ready. When you coming home? Where you at? When you coming home? Where you at? When you coming home? And if you've been in the relationship long enough, it may have already stopped. Like, the text messages may just stop and she's just like, fuck you, I know you're not going to come home. And then you come home in this fatigued state. And you come home with no sleep. You come home with no morning routine. You come home with no motivation, no meditation. You come home with no inspiration. You come home as a whipped dog to your wife and children. And then your wife and children just want the thing they want from you. They just want love and attention. They just want time with you. They just want to talk to you. They just want to be with you. They want the same kind of time and attention you've been giving your employees and your team and your clients all day long. They want that kind of time and attention. But you can't give them that time and attention because you're fucking exhausted. But you know what? You're also addicted. You're addicted to trying to keep the game in play. And so you stay up late at night. You don't go to sleep because you think you got to catch up after the kids go to bed. You think you got to catch up when you get home. So you come home, you eat some food, you hug everybody, you disappear to your office, you get on your fucking laptop, and you start working again. But you know you're not working. Half the shit you're doing is bullshit. You're sucked up into social media. You're all over the goddamn place. You have no mental fucking discipline whatsoever. And here you tell me you want to take your company from 40 million to 80 million? Fuck you. And take your company to 80 million. Why would I tell you take your company to 80 million if we're going to take your company to 80 million only for you to lose the entire thing and have it stripped from you, have a hostile takeover happen because you fucking fall asleep at the goddamn wheel, or have your wife in the middle of the night sleeping with some other fucking man because you never come home, and then you losing everything inside of a divorce, or better than that, children who actually disown you as a father on your pursuit to creating quote-unquote wealth. And I can only talk this way because it's how I spent my first 10 years. God damn it. And there was nobody to talk to me. Like, they weren't talking to me about this. The mentors that I listened to were people who talked to me about money. And when money's your God and that's the only thing you want to talk about, well, then there's a lot of things that make sense. Right? There's a lot of things that make sense. You know, working out 8 hours a day makes sense if all you're going to do is work out every day and that's the only thing you had to do. It's like the guys that would surf 8 hours a day. There's guys around here where I live, they surf 8 hours a day. I don't surf like 8 hours. I surf 8 hours in a week. They surf more in one day than I surf an entire week. Swell's coming in, wind died, the waves are going to be great all day. I'm going to be in here hustling. They're going to be out there surfing. Yet at the end of the day, they're getting into shitty vehicles, driving to the sandwich shop at 38 years old, wondering why they're still single and hustling. Now, I don't have a problem with that. I do wish I could surf as good as they do, but I'm unwilling to sacrifice a habit or lifestyle in order to do that. And brother, there is so much that you are sacrificing. There's so much that you are sacrificing. You're sacrificing your health to try to create some false illusion of wealth. You're sacrificing your marriage with this false idea that somehow it's just gonna work itself out. You're sacrificing your happiness. And all you replace your happiness with is an addiction. You're not even happy in your addiction. The next thing you know, you're drinking every night to go to sleep. You take an Adderall every morning to wake up. In the middle of the day, you're pounding coffee like it was your religion. And all in the name of what? I'm going to have you, as we wrap this up, your perspective drives everything. Before this show, you had a perspective. Now, after listening to the show for 50-some minutes, I'm hoping that I collided with some of the things that you're saying. Because these are the types of collisions that I wished I had had. Somebody would collide with me over what power actually looks like. That not just pretty pictures on Instagram with your wife and children matter. What matters is being able to come home, sit on the couch, and have your wife want you there. What matters is wanting your children wanting you to come home. Your power is not just there to produce financial wealth. Your power is there to produce true wealth, to have it all in body, being, balance, and business. And the good news is this thing is not a complicated game, my friends. It's not complicated. I'm not talking about some system in science that requires you to be fucking really smart. It doesn't. Actually, the dumber you are, the easier it is. Smart people have a hard time with it because they want it to be really fucking hard and complicated and smart. I'm like, it's not smart. It's very simple. If you want to produce more, you must have more power. If you want more power, you must have it all, which means you must hit your core 4 every single morning before you hit the door to go to war. You must take a shit through the stack, and you must attack with the stack the issues and triggers of your day every single morning. You must sleep well. And you must have a morning routine that works not just Monday through Friday, but that works on Saturday and Sunday. Last comment on this. How funny is it that a man would use a power routine Monday through Friday, and then the weekend, when he's supposed to spend and be present with his children, he decides to fucking sleep in? Not do the morning routine. And look how fucked up that is. Mimosas by 10 a.m., drunk as fuck by 2 p.m., and or just sedating and driving kids to soccer practice and all over the place, only desperately hoping and waiting to go to a movie and sit down and ignore your family again. Brother, you don't have to continue down this bullshit path. You don't. I did it for 10 years. Please, for yourself, for your family, for your wife, for your children, stop this fucking bullshit. Stop it. Choose something different. Stand back from your life right now and ask yourself, if I got more power and I did produce, so what? Like, what am I actually trying to create? There's only so much fucking money that you can spend, bro. At a certain point, your life has to matter. And that is so hard to help young entrepreneurs get. They don't get it. I wouldn't have gotten it. And I remember hearing old dudes like me now talking about this. And some of you are like, you're 41, you're not an old dude. I was like, man, I have been hustling like a motherfucker for almost 2 decades. I have not lived a normal life at all. Like, my wisdom factor is high, my youth and age may be low, but my face tells a different show. So if you're young and you're listening to this, you got a chance. If you're older and you're listening to this, you have a chance. And there is not ever a time that you're going to come into where it's too far past for you to fucking choose something different. You can choose to change. Tony Robbins says it perfectly. He says that transformation is not a journey. Transformation is a decision. It's a decision to fucking do something different. It's a decision to play all in. It's a decision to fucking do what you have to do so the life can be different. And so as we wrap up today's episode and we sit inside of this topic of power, let's review what we've come from. Your perspective itself is what arrives and opens up your possibility. Your perspective is correlated and directly linked to your power. But your power is linked to so many things when it comes to your central nervous system, to your brain, and to your heart. And today we've talked about some simple things like sleep. We've talked about some other simple things like actually hitting your core 4. We've talked about some other simple things, which is having a morning routine. These two simple things of getting sleep and a morning routine will change far more than you ever imagined. So you may be sitting there and listening to the show and saying, oh, dude, give us some real tactics. This sounds like something that is so cliche. And yet inside of it, why is it cliche? Because it's simple and it's something you're not fucking doing. That's my challenge for you this week. Figure out what you've got to do to get yourself in power in the morning. Next week, we're going to head into the conversation of production. The conversation of production and the doing of things doesn't matter if you're being as shit. If you are constipated as fuck, you cannot run down the road happy and joyful because you got shit in your gut and things that got to come out. Gentlemen, your brain and your soul is exactly the same way. That is why we run this show. It's why I host this show, Warrior Wealth, because I'm committed to helping men understand there is a different way to living life as a businessman, and that starts with understanding you are your number one asset, your business is your number one investment, and the fastest map to being able to understand this is inside of a manual and a science known as the Warrior's Way to Having It All. You can pick it up at warriorbook.com. We'd love to have you part of that conversation. Join over 10,000 men who have consumed of that content, purchased that book for $100, and been shipped over 27 different countries. I would love you to be the next one on that journey, the next brother, next businessman who decided to take a stand not just for his profits, but also to take a stand for his purpose and his family and his life. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. We'll be back next week with the topic of production as we dive deeper into the topic of advertising and specifically the idea of what I call strategic seduction. Until next week, have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next week.